Local folklore whispers of a tragic love story that should never have been. A monk, who resided at a monastery where Borley Rectory would later stand, fell in love with a nun from a nearby convent. Obviously, such relationships were forbidden, so the star-crossed lovers decided to elope and take their romance to blossom somewhere far away and live happily ever after. Tragically, they didn't live happily ever after. Not at all. As the nun from the Bures convent and the monk from the Borley monastery attempted to make their escape in a horse-drawn coach, their plans were discovered by the religious authorities, who intercepted the fleeing couple. And so, the love story quickly turned to ashes, and the tragic monk and his lover were sentenced to death. The story goes that the monk was either hanged or beheaded, but the nun was subjected to a much more sinister and severe punishment. It's said that the nun's fate was quite literally sealed, as she was tied up and left to starve to death behind a bricked-up wall within the monastery. This story, however, is just the beginning, in what would go on to become famously known worldwide as England's most haunted house. The Haunting of Borley Rectory.
Now that first day, I had a very skeptical researcher with me. He was a newspaper man from Danbury, and he was obnoxiously skeptical. But he was keeping a full diary for me, so he was very, very helpful. I worried about what his effect was going to have on this building. So I was in and I was discerning. I was standing down by the altar. I was with a group of people, and I was discerning. When all of a sudden, he came charging in through the back door, and he said, "Something is hitting me. It's hitting me. It's hitting me." And he was absolutely hysterical. It was hysterical. Now, at that point, he said, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe."
Borley Rectory was built in 1863 by Borley's first rector, Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull, who lived from 1833 to 1892. The rectory was huge, although it wasn't exactly easy on the eye. It was a two-storey red brick building with no less than 23 rooms. The rectory also had 3 staircases and was built within grounds of nearly 4 acres. It was located opposite Borley Church on the Essex side of the Essex-Suffolk border. Nearby was a cottage, part of the original stable block, and a variety of smaller buildings. Almost immediately after Henry Bull and his family moved into Borley Rectory, they found themselves engulfed in the chaos of inexplicable paranormal activity. Footsteps were heard echoing through empty corridors. Disembodied voices were often heard in the darkness of the night. Objects would move of their own volition, as if being manipulated by an unseen force. Possibly, most eerily of all, bells would toll independently, almost as an omen of death. Unfortunately, on 27th of February 1939, the rectory was almost entirely destroyed by a fire. It was eventually demolished in 1944. As already stated, local legend told of a monk being executed after having eloped with a nun. It has also been stated that upon their attempted escape, the unfortunate driver of the horse and carriage was allegedly taken prisoner and ultimately executed for his role in the proceedings. Periodic sightings of a phantom coach and horse with a headless driver have been reported. Essays published in the 1940s explored a second local legend that a former French Roman Catholic nun, who married into the Waldegrave family of Borley, was in 1667 strangled by her husband in a building that had occupied the site of Borley Rectory and buried beneath the cellar floor. The case was investigated, and it had been concluded that a French woman known as Marie Lair may have been the victim. After Henry Bull's death in 1892, the building passed to his son, Henry Foyster Bull, known as Harry, to avoid confusion. Borley Rectory had a reputation for haunting phenomena at least from the time of Bull's incumbency in the late 19th century. A servant of the Bulls, Mrs. E. Byford, claimed to have heard footsteps when no other living person was present. Mr. P. Shaw Jeffrey, a future headmaster of Colchester Royal Grammar School, stayed at the rectory at various times in 1885 and 1886 and described lots of small adventures. Stones falling from nowhere, objects moving by themselves. He also claimed that he saw the nun several times and often heard the coach go clattering by. Over the course of several years, various visitors reported seeing the nun peering in at them through a window. The sightings became so frequent and frightening that Bull had the window bricked up. Of all the incidents at Borley, possibly the most famous was the first sighting of the nun, witnessed by 4 of the Bull sisters on 28th of July 1900. The anniversary, July 28th, is still celebrated by enthusiasts of the legend today, and is considered important as being one of the few sightings of a ghost to be witnessed by 3 people simultaneously. Ethel Bull's best account of the sighting of the nun was recorded in 1947 by the BBC. In her own words, "I was walking around the garden with 2 of my sisters, and they'd been to a garden party and were telling me an amusing story that had happened. And then they wondered. I didn't take any notice, and they looked down at me, and I said, 'Look, there's a nun walking there.' And I was terrified, and so were they when they saw her, and it sent cold shivers down our backs, and we simply flew up to the house. And then we saw my eldest sister, who was staying with us, and she said, 'Oh, I'm not going to be frightened.' So she came down, and when she saw the nun, she made to go across the potato bed to meet the nun, and the nun turned and came as it were to meet her. And she was seized with panic and simply flew up to the house." Harry also claimed to have seen the nun and a phantom coach. When the story of the haunting of Borley Rectory broke, the haunted coach with the headless coachman featured heavily. The newspaper stories told of ghostly figures of headless coachmen and a nun, an old-time coach drawn by 2 bay horses which appears and vanishes mysteriously. This coach was supposed to have been heard by Harry Bull, amongst others. More than once, Harry Bull saw and heard the phantasmal coach with which the Borley story is so strongly associated. The coach was drawn by 2 horses, and driven by a headless coachman. The whole turnout disappeared while still in view. One night, Mr. Bull was returning to the rectory and was in the road just outside the house. Suddenly, he heard a great clatter of hooves on the roadway, and the rumbling as of heavy wheels. Wondering who could be in such a hurry, in such a deserted spot, he stepped to the side of the road in order to let the vehicle pass. The sounds passed him, but that was all. There was nothing tangible to be seen, and the noise gradually diminished and could be heard dying away in the distance. The Bull's groom gardener, Edward Cooper, saw what he described as coach and horses with glittering harness sweep across rectory grounds during the period from 1916 to 1919. Probably the most impressive sight that Mr. Cooper saw was the black coach. One bright moonlit night, when he and his wife were retiring to rest, he happened to look out of the window, and in the meadow by the church opposite, he saw some bright moving lights. Wondering why such lights should be present at such a time and place, he watched and realised that the lights were approaching. As they neared the road, he saw that the lights were really the headlamps attached to a large old-fashioned black coach, which was rapidly sweeping across the hedge and road towards him and the rectory. He gasped in astonishment. The whole turnout was so clear-cut that he could see the harness of the two horses glittering in the light of the headlamps and the moon. On top of the coach were two figures wearing high-top hats. In amazement he shouted to his wife, but she was just too late to see this extraordinary spectacle. She arrived at the window as the coach swept into the farmyard and disappeared. Amongst the most exciting stories about Borley Rectory is the sighting of the legless man. This is one of a number of incidents that date from the early years of the 20th century when Henry Bull's large family had grown up. The legless man was said to have been sighted by Harry. One day, Harry was in the garden with his retriever, Juvenile, when the dog suddenly started howling and cowering with fright. Looking in the direction in which the dog was pointing, Harry saw the legs of a figure, the upper part of which was apparently hidden by some fruit trees. The legs moved, and when they had cleared the bushes, Harry saw that they belonged to a man who was headless. The figure went towards the postern gate, a gate which was always kept locked. The figure disappeared into the vegetable garden, where it was lost to sight. Following the death of Harry Bull on June 9, 1927, Borley Rectory remained in an eerie state of silence. In the following year, on 2nd of October, the Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife moved into the house. Shortly thereafter, the family reported several creepy incidents, including the ghostly sounds of servant bells ringing despite being disconnected, eerie lights appearing in windows, and disembodied footsteps echoing through the night. Soon after moving in, Smith's wife, while cleaning out a cupboard, reportedly came across a brown paper package containing the skull of a young woman. In addition, Smith's wife believed she saw a horse-drawn carriage at night. The Smiths contacted the Daily Mirror newspaper, asking to be put in touch with the Society for Psychical Research. On 10th of June 1929, the newspaper sent a reporter who promptly wrote the first in a series of articles detailing the mysteries of Borley Rectory. The paper also arranged for Harry Price, a paranormal researcher, to make his first visit to the house. Price arrived on the 12th of June, and immediately phenomena of a new kind appeared, incidents which defied the law of physics. Stones were thrown, and a glass candlestick was witnessed levitating before their very eyes, before hurtling into a nearby wall and smashing into pieces. Spirit messages were eerily formed on the frame of a mirror, seemingly written by unseen hands. Price claimed to have encountered the ghostly residence himself. The tragic image of the nun, the terrifying headless coach driver, and even the spirit of Henry Bull himself lurking within the empty, shadow-filled halls at night. However, as soon as Price left, these occurrences ceased. Smith's wife later maintained that she suspected Price, an expert conjurer, of falsifying the phenomena. Despite this, after enduring enough of the torment at the hands of the ghosts of Borley Rectory, the Smiths vacated Borley on 14th of July 1929. Understandably, the parish had some difficulty in finding a replacement. On 16th of October 1930, the Reverend Lionel Foister and his wife Marianne moved into the house along with their adopted daughter Adelaide. Lionel Foister was a first cousin of the Balls. He was 58, in poor health, and financially troubled when he became rector of Borley. Marianne Foister was 27 years younger, by nature a highly strung, outgoing young woman, prone to much fantasizing and storytelling, often about herself and her own background. Their 5-year stay at Borley consisted of a complication of events that combined unusual and at times unsavoury domestic affairs. Marianne took a lover and entered into a bigamous marriage with both her husband's knowledge and, it seems, approval, with a wealth of allegedly paranormal happenings that cover practically the entire range of reported psychic phenomena. Lionel Foister, for a short period, kept a diary, which demonstrates that for a period of 15 months beginning in late 1930, the family was seemingly under a siege of paranormal activity, which included attacks by phantom figures. Wine which had been poured into a glass mysteriously transformed into ink. A wine bottle was witnessed being launched down an otherwise completely empty staircase. Bells were heard tolling at times when no living person was present. At some point, a phantom hand was reportedly seen by Lionel. Marianne was locked in her room, and she also appeared to faint and was helped to bed by Mrs. Goldney, an SPR investigator. The Foisters eventually left Borley in October 1935 and spent the next 10 years drifting through various addresses in Suffolk. Lionel died on 18th of April 1945, and shortly afterwards, Marianne married an American serviceman, Robert O'Neill, and left England as one of Eisenhower's sweethearts in 1946. In 1936, Borley was combined with a neighbouring parish, and the new rector, a Reverend A.C. Henning, made his home in Liston. The building's owners, the Church Commission, decided to sell the gloomy house, which was fast falling into disrepair. After an absence of several years, Harry Price eventually returned to Borley in 1937. Initially dismissive of much of the reported Foister phenomena, he took the opportunity of the house being empty and the establishment of a good relationship with Alfred Henning to carry out a year-long on-site investigation. Between May 1937 and May 1938, a group of hand-picked observers, recruited through in the Times, visited Borley and spent many hours watching and waiting for phenomena. Reports of their vigils were sent to Harry Price in London. From then until his death 10 years later, Price was involved in some way with the investigation of the Borley haunting. In late 1938, the rectory was eventually sold to William Gregson, who bought the house with the intention of capitalising on its ghostly reputation. In November 1940, Harry Price published the first of his 2 books on the rectory case and instantly brought Borley into the public eye once more. The Most Haunted House in England was followed in 1946 by The End of Borley Rectory, in which he reported on his continued efforts to unravel the Borley mysteries and theorised about the cause of the haunting. He was planning a 3rd book on the Borley ghosts when he died from a sudden heart attack at his home in Pulborough, West Sussex in March 1948. Instantly, the Borley case had lost its greatest champion. However, Price's involvement with the rectory was not without controversy. His methods and findings were often questioned, and he was accused of exaggeration and even fraud. Some suggested that the floating brick incident was staged, a trick of wires and creative photography. Others pointed to inconsistencies in the observers' reports and questioned the reliability of their testimonies. But, despite the criticism, Price remained steadfast in his belief that the rectory was genuinely haunted. Nevertheless, the narrative of the Borley Rectory haunting took a dramatic turn when Marianne Foister confessed to orchestrating some of the paranormal events. In a series of letters to Price, Marianne admitted that she had staged some hauntings to cover up her marital affairs. She claimed that the wall writings were her work, and that she had moved objects around the house to create the illusion of poltergeist activity. However, she maintained that not all the incidents were fraudulent. She insisted that unseen entities had physically attacked her, and that she could not explain all the phenomena at the rectory. The final chapter in the rectory's spectral saga came in 1939, when a fire destroyed the house. The fire, believed to have been started by the new owner, Captain W. H. Gregson, reduced the once grand mansion to ruins. However, even in its destruction, the rectory continued to yield secrets. During the clearing of the site, a discovery was made that added a chilling postscript to the rectory's tale. In a cellar, workers found the bones of a young woman, along with a silver medallion. Could these be the remains of the spectral nun who had been reported so many times? The investigation and controversy surrounding Borley Rectory have contributed to its enduring allure. The house may be gone, but its legacy lives on, a testament to our fascination with the unknown and the unexplainable.